Welcome, everybody. I think that we'll try and make a start. Hi, my name is Joe Teal. I'm the Director of Academic Policy and Research for the Montana University System. And I kind of have the boring job before you get to the interesting folks of telling you what this is all about. So we have 5 speakers today who are on their 3rd stop of a 7-stop tour around the state. Bozeman, I think, is our biggest town by a long shot. And their job is to be representatives of a much larger enterprise by your public universities. And that enterprise is not only to educate students, but also to push forward boundaries of science, to find new innovations, new solutions for complicated problems, and to build the technologies that will be change the future of the state and our country and the world. And in Montana, there is research activities that change our state, that change the globe, that are world recognized. And so just a couple of facts before we begin. First, I know it's the other institution, but did you know that at the University of Montana, there are 2 researchers, Ray Calloway and Steve Running, who are recognized as among the 1,000 most cited scientists in the globe. So the most influential minds, among the most influential minds in our world. Did you also know that at this university, and through their ag experiment stations across the state, 47% of the wheat acreage in Montana is planted in varieties that were developed by Montana State University. That means across all of those acres, there are varieties that are developed to fit Montana's landscape and climate to make farmers' work more profitable. And I think one exciting thing about this event is you also see how those projects and those innovations and that research is increasingly becoming how we teach. And so you're going to hear from some of these faculty about how they get students involved at a very practical level from the start of their education, so that when they get through at undergraduate, when they're going to graduate school or they're applying for jobs, they can say, not only did I attend the lectures where I learned some of the techniques, but I've applied those techniques to very real-world problems, important problems, and have understood the process of using that to develop new data, to find solutions to innovate. So I'm excited to introduce 5 speakers who have been selected by different colleges and universities around the state to talk about this much larger enterprise and this much larger effort. The format is we have 8 minutes per speaker, and after each speaker, we're going to take a couple of questions, 2 or 3 at most. But we do hope that you can stick around at the end to have some conversations, to meet people, to connect. But before we begin, I want to make sure to thank Montana State University, the Museum of the Rockies, Renee Rial-Opera, who's the Vice President for Research at Montana State, for hosting us, for contributing to this effort, to making all of this possible. And with that, I will turn things over to our first speaker from Montana State University, Tricia Seifert.
Thanks, Joe. So I'm really interested in the transition from high school into college. And about 1 year ago, I had the opportunity to share some of these early gaming ideas with this audience. And maybe some of you were even here when I was sharing the very early stages of building a board game, creating a board game that will help high school students practice how to do college before they actually come to college. I sort of joke, the goal is to figure out how to do college before being done in by college. And why does that matter? Well, because in 2020, which is just around the corner, our job projections for the state of Montana suggest that having some level of education beyond high school is going to become a necessity. With 62% of the jobs projected in 2020 in this state requiring either some college, a vocational certificate, or a 4-year degree. And when we look at our college-going rates, you can see that while we've improved in the last 20 years, our college-going rate still is lower than the number of educated workforce folks that we need. And then, this is the real kicker, because of those who attend college in year one, not all of them come back for year two. In fact, in our 2-year colleges, 50% don't return for that second year. And so we are under-educating people in Montana for our own workforce needs. So that got me thinking, well, what can we do to make that transition from high school to college more simplified, where students feel like they're college material, that they know how to play the game so that they can gain college effectively. And it started out with asking a lot of questions. My research team and I, we traveled around the state of Montana, and we played a Jeopardy game with high school students, and we asked them, what questions do you have about making that transition to college? And some of them are really existential, like how do you eat healthy? What happens if I get sick? And some of them are really about how to be in college and how to determine where your interests lie, where your strengths lie. And that has to do with how do I choose a major? And how often do I change a major? And is that okay? So normalizing these questions. One of the key questions that we heard over and over was students saying, I'm not sure how to balance my time. How do I both do well in school and be socially active? Have lots of friends, be connected, because you need a support system in order to get through those hard classes. I know that from my own research. And so we started to really think, how can we help students play and practice the time management strategies that they will need when they get to college? And so I went first to people who know a lot about gaming, because our high school counselors, they're one conduit for many, many students. Here in the Bozeman School District, our counselors often serve 300 or more individual students in terms of their application for admission and financial aid and their academic preparation. Out in rural Montana, a single counselor may be the counselor for kindergartens through seniors. There's a whole lot of developmental trajectory in between that a single person is called upon. And so, in terms of the college readiness, we've got application. Last week was college application week, and high school seniors all across the state filed an application to attend one of Montana's public universities or colleges at no cost. That's a great first step. But just getting in the door is not enough to stay. And so my work really looks at this college knowledge, this third part of the stool. How do we help students to understand the norms, the expectations, the values, how to do college? And a huge part of that is how you manage your time while you're here. There's a solution, and part of it is through practice. And we know through game-based learning and research on game-based learning that when students have a chance to simulate that which they're going to be asked to do, they learn, they practice, they fail, right? Sometimes you don't win the game. You play the game again, and then the next time you might win. Well, that's a hard thing to do when the consequences are real. And help them figure out how to choose what college to apply to. On our drive over, we actually Google searched what are the top 5 reasons why high school students don't pursue going on to college. And one of them was just simply knowing how to choose which one to go to. So we're looking at, once you've made that choice, how do you manage your time once you get here? And down here in the corner, you can see these blocks. This is actually how you play the game. Those blocks are your blocks of time. And you get to, as a player, determine how you want to use the 12 blocks that are allotted to you every week. The game is a simulation of your first semester of college. We play in 9-week times. And what's interesting is that in the first week, when we talk to students, they're baffled. They don't understand the game. It's really complex. They have to figure out how they're going to use their time between social events like sushi night and making friends like maybe Olivia. Friends always come with some sorts of costs and benefits. Olivia is one of those very stressful friends. We all have them in our friend circle. And spending time on your lab report. Students share, man, this is really complex the first week. But by week 3, they understand how the game is played. And so my opportunity as the game master, as the debriefer, as the counselor to some extent in this case, is to say, yeah, so how do you think that would translate into your first weeks of college? And then the light bulbs come on. Oh, right. Yeah, if I'm in a new place, it's probably going to feel complex and a little crazy and a little confusing. But by week 3, I'll start to understand the rhythm. And so we have an opportunity to demystify this hidden curriculum that if you've been in college a long time, if you're a junior, you've already figured it out. But for those first-year students, many who are the first in their family to come to MSU Bozeman or Montana Tech or Flathead Valley Community College, this place can be really baffling. This game allows them to play and practice and use what they've learned and the strategies they've developed through gameplay to inform their actual decisions. I spent a lot of time behind the windshield these days. Like most Montanans, you drive around, and 3,000 miles later, I've done two tours of the High Line, and just last week, through a grant from I Graduate Montana, I played with students at Florence High School and with staff and faculty at Darby High School and with the entire senior class at Victor High School. And what we've heard from students is that this is the first game I feel like would be useful for real life. I was a senior in Sydney. Another young man, a sophomore, said to me, I like that you can see your time in your hands because it makes time physical and tangible, and I can see how I make decisions and how that has an influence on my actual gameplay. Educators love the interactive nature of the game too, because oftentimes we talk to students. Well, we talk at students, quite truthfully. This game gives a space for students to learn, to play, to practice, and then we, as educators on the edge, get to debrief where the real learning happens. The launch strategy is to continue playing. I'm fortunate to have a couple small grants right now so that I can go out and play with high school students from around the state. The other interesting thing is, as I've presented this idea at conferences, folks from around the world have come up to me and said, I need your game. So much so that we hosted an educator from the London School of Economics in May who did the first 1,000-mile loop on the High Line with me. Imagine living in downtown London and then going up to the High Line. She commented that she's never been so long of distance without seeing a house. And I said, well, that's Montana for you. But we had a great time playing with the entire high school from Opine, all 8 kids. And as we talked to them, you could see them thinking. And many of them commented, I wish I would have had this game before I was a senior. I might have made some different choices in where I'm going to go to college. So then I kicked into educator mode and said, the decision you made for next fall, you can make it again. And if when you go to that community college, you say, I want to go to a 4-year university, you can make that transfer. Because there are good people like my colleagues who are here today that will share about the amazing things that are going on in our 2-year colleges and how they immediately segue and transfer those students into university. So we're not doing it alone. We're doing it to help with everyone around the state and many others. And we invite you to be part of that journey. And if you want to follow us, you can follow the Road Tour Continues. And we're on Facebook at Blueprints for Student Success-Montana, or you could send me an email at my montana.edu account. I want to acknowledge that this game came from a really small seed grant, that my dean believed in this idea and said, I want to see this idea come to fruition. And the game, the ideas behind the game, and the actual game mechanics came from students themselves. Student game developers here at MSU Bozeman, who I met at the Blackstone Launchpad, said, hey, we can see the value of your idea, and we want to take it forward. So this is the perfect example of seed grant to a faculty member partnered with undergraduate research and ideas and motivation to create something brand new that has the opportunity, I believe, to make major change as students do college in their first year. Thank you. So we typically have time for a couple questions. Tracy?
So many games, but not all, have a competitive element in them in which there is someone who can be a winner.
Yes.
So how does your game have a winner and a loser? How do you address that issue?
Yeah, so the object of the game is there are 2 tracks, and I actually have it in the back, and I'm happy to share it later. There is the academic track and the social track. And the object of the game is to have the highest score on both. So a maximum score is 30, 15 on each, and you actually can't win without doing well, both academically and socially. And that really simulates the true college experience. Because to be at an optimal basis, you need to have a support network, you need to have some friends, as well as to do well academically. So it's really interesting to play with students. They're often very competitive. It's a 4-player game. We often play with teams of 2, and then you get to see that twosome really talk as they're strategically figuring out where they're going to put their blocks of time, because they want to maximize their choices over their friends. So it's really interesting to see. I have also played with adults who are far more competitive than students. Yes?
That study that showed the return rate for community colleges and four-year colleges, do you know the reasons why kids didn't return to school the second year?
Yeah, so students, they fail to come back for a number of reasons. It's not a single reason. Some of it is academics, but that's actually generally the least of the reasons. Oftentimes it's financial. As many of those times as there's something at home that's calling them back, a home situation. In fact, as we were playing with 2 students from Victor said, the life event cards need to have more about home events that bring us home, that take up our time. And so that was a really interesting thing that we're going to incorporate in the next version of the game. Students often also attrit or withdraw because they don't feel that they belong. They don't find their niche. They don't figure out that there are all these programs and services and opportunities to get involved and get connected on campus. And that's literally one of the key components of the game, is to introduce students. In the middle of the game board are a whole host of programs and services that students often don't even know about until a moment of crisis, when sometimes it feels too late. Like, oh, I wish I would have known about academic advising. And even though we tell students this over and over, there is a point where it's saturation, and they just can't take it anymore in those super intensive orientation sessions. And so the idea here is if we can play over time, it starts to percolate. And it's an empirical research question, and I'm looking forward to actually going out and doing full-blown research studies with this intervention. Thank you.